Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to episode 16 of On the Virtual Track. I'm JP, and as you can see on my left hand side, your right hand side, I've got Mr. Tim Walters with me. Now, this is going to be an in depth history lesson of Tim and what he's been up to. Over the last week or so, 2 weeks or so, I've been receiving messages about multiple different things, and I've got multiple different things to see to show you as well, including a lovely picture with a lovely full head of hair. So there we go. Yeah, we're going to look forward to that one. But Tim, welcome in, mate. How are you?
Yeah, trying to cope with the heat. This is going to be the new normal, so I'm planning to get used to it. It's kind of like it's like when they introduce a new top model in racing.
Suck it up.
It's the new environment. Live with it.
Yeah, suck it up, buttercup, and get on with it. Now, the interesting thing about Tim as well, American accent, but you're not there at the moment, are you?
No, very rarely in the U.S. I've been in Germany for, let's see, we moved here in 2003, so going on, over 22 years now.
Yeah.
And, currently, I'm in Berlin.
Any specific reason why you chose Germany?
I didn't choose Germany, but my wife got a job here. She's German. We met in the U.S. and we went to graduate school together and both taught in universities in the U.S. for a number of years. And then she got an offer to teach in Germany, and she thought, yeah, I'd like to try to do that because she'd never done it. And we came over here and decided to try it out, and we stayed since then.
Full fluent German?
The Germans wouldn't say I'm fluent, but they're entirely happy to deal with my German rather than them having to speak English.
That works. Anything works as well. So now we're going to dive back into your sim racing journey first. There's a lot I want to touch on with you, Tim, to be blatantly honest with you. But we're going to go into your sim racing journey first. How far back do we go to when Tim Walters first decided that he was going to play racing games?
Okay, play racing games. That's a good way to put it. So I would say, well, actually, I remember a board game, right? A literal board game with little racing cars and a dial that you would spin in order to figure out how many spaces you moved or how fast you were going and so forth. It was kind of a strategy game on a board. And we did that in like 1975 when I was in high school. But the first real sim, I would say were the arcade games.
Yeah.
And for example, I don't know when I started doing arcades, but the thing I remember very clearly is I went to. I was living on the West Coast. I'd been in Northern California and Oregon my entire life. Went to Oregon State University. Decided I was going to go to graduate school, and I was accepted in Johns Hopkins, which is in Baltimore, which is all the way on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
And so I needed to figure out how to get from point A to point B. So I sold my 1971 Volkswagen Bug and bought a 1961 T1 Type 1 Volkswagen van, split window, 16 window split window van, and drove across the country with a buddy of mine who also had a split window van. That was an amazing road trip. And we arrived in Baltimore about, a couple of weeks before classes started, and before my stipend, before my financial support started. And I was just at that point broke. I had no money. I mean, I literally had nothing. I couldn't eat. But the pub near the university was running a Monday night pole position arcade game competition. Remember pole position?
I do.
It was just swerving between cars, basically.
Yeah,
right?
It was.
And
everything was full speed as well. There was no braking.
It was absolute full speed. It was just reaction time, really. And if you made a mistake, then your car would blow up, and so on and so forth. And so I guess in the first time that I entered that, right after I arrived in Baltimore, I won, and the prize was $50 in bar credit. Now, of course, the point was you were supposed to immediately spend all that by buying drinks for everybody at the bar, right?
Yeah,
But I said, no, this I'm going to use this to eat for the next 2 weeks. And so
absolutely.
they hated me because I would go into the bar and say, how much credit do I have left? I think I've got like $37.50 left or something. I'll have a hamburger. But that allowed me to survive until my stipend started. And then it was like later on, what was the other one? The big evolution, Virtua Racing. That was like proper. That was like a proper sim almost.
I think so. Yeah.
That was a number of years later. That was in the late '80s, early '90s.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he said it developed by Sega, released it for arcades in '92.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, about the time I finished graduate school. Yep.
Yeah, I think that was the thing, and I think a lot of people underestimate what this sort of thing had to do for us as well. That's the second series of the game as well. There's some of the graphics on the.
There you go. Yeah,
there you go. The Virtua.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Up here.
That's it. Yep.
That's it there, and then the pole position was this.
That
now,
one, yeah.
If anybody remembers this, everything was full flat. There was you didn't have to brake, you didn't have to slow down.
No sense in braking.
No, that was what basically you're in the same era as what I grew up with. That was pretty much our thing growing up, wasn't it? As we get that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do find it interesting that people always start in the same way as us older people, should we say?
Yeah. So then, if you want to know in terms of actual sim racing that we're doing now, then there was a big gap because I was away from. I kind of made a conscious decision when I was trying to finish graduate school and trying to establish myself when I was working as a professor, not to get a computer that I could play games on, to try to take work more seriously. So I had very, very crude flight simulators and so forth, but I didn't do any racing. It's the one, I don't know if the one, but one clear indicator of how old I am is that I simply never learned how to use a controller, like an Xbox controller. I can't do any of those games that require a controller. I need to have, something to steer with, or maybe a keyboard. So for decades, I didn't do any of those games. I watched my son do FIFA and so on and so forth, but none of it was anything I could really participate in. And then it was 2020, not yet COVID, but weeks before. And my younger brother, Mike, who's also in the Tanzo Racing League, he contacted me and said that he'd gotten into sim racing, and he was like already way into it. I mean, he'd been doing it for weeks, and we hadn't communicated that often, or we communicated a few times a year, really. But he told me he was into sim racing and encouraged me to do it. And I thought, okay, sure, that's something we can do together. And then COVID hit, and it was like, right, impossible to get any equipment. And it took me weeks to get a very rudimentary like Xbox S and Thrustmaster, crude Thrustmaster wheel and pedals. But then we started enjoying ourselves together. But he was on PC and I was on the Xbox, so I think there was only one game. Was it Project Cars? I'm not sure. Yeah, that was my original. There you go. That's my original setup. You can see the white Xbox over there on the shelf under the window. And my camping chair. Up here. This was a ridiculously comfortable chair, by the way.
I'm surprised. It does look nice with the 3-inch cushion sat underneath your bum.
Exactly. And it's got a cup holder and so forth. So.
It's got loads on it. It'll be fine.
So what we would do, we would just hot lap together, but that meant we were exchanging emails or messages like 4 times a day. Like updating who was faster on this and what we learned and how to go faster on that corner. And it was fantastic. And we did that for like a year, really over a year, until I got onto a PC. I mean, he helped me get onto a PC. He's the electronic engineer. He knows all the stuff. And then I finally got you can show my play seat, right? Actually, both of us got a play seat at about the same time. He got it first. I got it after.
Yeah, I believe. Hold on. Let me just Come on.
And shortly after that, I got set up with a PC, and then we could start doing. There you go. Also, a very, very comfortable place to sit. I would sit in this thing for hours and watch not only F1 races but movies. And I was like, it's maligned on the serious or unserious sim racing chats of various kinds because it flexes too much and it's not, blah blah blah. But I was a kind of violent defender of it. I thought it was fine while I was using it. I can see the advantages now that I have an aluminum rig, but I used that very happily for like 3 years. And now we were both on PC, so we could start looking at leagues that we could do together, given that he's in Washington State and I'm in Germany, so there's a 9-hour difference. And we did an Australian league together for an ACC league for a number of months. And then about at least a year and a half ago, maybe going on 2 years, I think I first heard about Tanzo and told him, and we both got into it. And it works out nicely because the races are at about 8 o'clock in the evening, my time, 11 a.m. his time, right? And so we can both participate, and we've been doing that, and I don't see any reason why we're ever going to leave the Tanzo races.
Okay, that's fair enough. And it's really quite interesting sometimes the fact that how pieces come together, because there's been so many people that started 2020, 2021 around the same COVID era, but I know as well that's when I got into it, and I think everybody so far has been in and around the same area, the same time. It's almost like everybody almost found out that iRacing existed round about the COVID time, and then everybody was like, "Oh, yeah, let's do that," because that's how I started, not commentating, but that was where I started from originally.
Yeah, well, you remember that the when the Formula One season was canceled or delayed for months and months in 2020. Then they started putting on, what were they called? There was a snappy title for it, like we still race or whatever, something. And a lot of Formula One stars or serious race car drivers. I mean, Montoya, Jacques Villeneuve, right? Yeah. Jenson Button, Alonso. Were getting involved in these things, and I think that. I mean, I don't know what the viewership was like, but I think that might have been a way in which people who had some interest in racing and now couldn't watch it, and or had some interest in gaming but didn't have any link to sim racing, made that connection. Now, okay, here's where racing is happening now. Oh, wow, I can actually do this too. Or here's a different kind of game, and I've got a PC, so I could do that as well. That probably led to a big increase in participation.
Absolutely. I think you've literally hit the nail on the head. I think, to be honest with you, everybody found it at the same time. Everybody discovered it at the same time, and I think if I can go through probably the 60 odd guests that have got on the list, probably the majority of them found it at the same time. I doubt very much that anybody, and if you are watching, let me know, because I might be wrong as well. The release date was iRacing as well. When did it originally come out? 2008.
Wow. Yeah.
Was the original by iRacing.com Motorsport Simulators in 2008. But I can guarantee very rarely nobody ever played it.
Yes.
And I'll be interested to know where it seems like COVID gave it that big financial boom to bring it out into the open. And I think that's a lot of what's been going on as well. But your motorsport career didn't start there.
No.
No. Did it?
Well, let's not say motorsport career is a little too grandiose. My participation in motorsports did not start there.
Okay, so let's run through, because I've got a selection of things I want to discuss first, and I want to know what's going on here.
Well, that's man, I'd give a lot to have that hair. So this is, I believe that building is still there. That is the main administrative tower, or whatever they call it, at Portland International Raceway in Portland, Oregon. I think that's what it says in the blurry lettering on the left side of my head. And there I am in my blue and white Nomex suit, which I still have, and miraculously enough, still fit in, although it's tearing at the seams. And that was probably 1977, maybe 1978. I started racing Formula Ford in 1977.
Okay. And was this the first sort of flurry in, was it?
Yeah, I did a very, very little bit of kart racing in when I was in high school. I couldn't afford a decent kart at all, so I bought a really, really bad, very old kart, and it was so unreliable it was virtually impossible to race. I think I participated in one race with it, and then I got rid of that, and I started. Hold on, I started. You can show that, but I have to catch up to this point.
All right, we'll leave it on here for a minute.
I started college at Oregon State after I got out of high school. And after 1 year, I thought, I don't know. So I was bold enough to sit my parents down and tell them that I was going to drop out of college and go race sports cars. And this was not the happiest thing they'd ever heard, because neither of them had gone to college, and they thought it was very, very, very important that their children do so. But they didn't stand in my way. And so that was the end of the summer of 1976. And then in the spring of 77, I drove from Corvallis, which is almost at the northern end of Oregon, all the way down through California to Willow Springs, and went to the Jim Russell Racing School in Willow Springs, which had, I think at that time, Merlin Mark 20 or MK20, however you pronounce, Formula
So is
Fords.
that one or the black
It's
one?
similar. It's similar to the 71. That is, so if you look at the 71, that is my.
Is this the 71?
No, that's the 101. Look at the other one.
Oh, numbers. Sorry, car numbers.
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about
71.
model numbers. Yeah,
So,
71.
So this, you can see these are the early generation Formula Fords, which are basically, cigar shaped with the radiator in the front, and not very sophisticated. And they went on like this for a long time. So the Merlin Mark 20 is probably also from 1970. This is a 1970 Winkelmann WDF2 that I bought in 1977 after I got back from the Jim Russell School to start racing in Portland. And then the next car is the Lola T440. So these were already available in 77, I think so, certainly by 78. And you can see this is when they're moving on to the kind of next concept. So the radiator is no longer in the nose. The nose is pointy and chisel shaped. The radiators are in the side pods. We've got an air box. We've got a little bit of a tail. Some of the other cars were even experimenting with skirts, although I think it was senseless on a Formula 4.
Yeah.
But you can see how this moved on from the ADF Formula Fords, which actually had the radiator between the driver and the engine, if I'm not mistaken. Arnie Loining's, what was it called? The Viking Formula Ford, which was really radical. I had a chance to visit him in his garage outside of Portland when he was conceiving that car, and he actually had me sit in a mock-up so he could do some measurements. So anyway, that's where we were. This transitional period between the kind of first generation, second generation Formula Fords.
And are we looking at? I just want to swap screens a minute, because that Formula Ford. Is it that one?
Is that the Loining?
That's the 78 Viking Formula Ford.
That is it. That is exactly it. Yeah, you can see how. I mean, this is like, it's like you know, as slim as it can possibly be. Right, the front suspension is entirely out of the airstream. I think the brakes are entirely inboard, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you can see the radiator is behind the seat. It's right there in line with the roll bar. Right?
Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, crazy. Yeah,
Even
beautiful. Yeah, I like
that. They've sold it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the I don't know if it came afterward or maybe at about the same time, but the ADF, which was very successful. I mean, the Vikings, I think, were a handful of them were ever produced. But the ADFs were fairly popular, and they were similar concept.
So how did all of this go? You start off on your journey. How far did you get with it? Where do we sit back and go, oh, actually, I was in IndyCar driving for so and so. And we're like, what?
That didn't happen.
Okay.
So let's see a couple of highlights, a couple of points along the road. So I got my very used 7-year-old Winkelmann WDF2. Started racing in '77. That required me to interact with a guy named Pierre Phillips, who was running a shop in Portland, Pierre Phillips Racing. That's where you would get, go to buy your helmet and so forth. And so I tried to hang out at that shop as often as I could. And one night I showed up there, and Pierre is talking to this guy. Who is it? Bobby Rahal. Because nice. Pierre is running Bobby Rahal in the Formula Atlantic Series that year. This is '77. So we end up, they end up basically using me for slave labor, and they have me. Bobby and I are sitting on the floor of the shop putting together wheels, right? The multiple modular wheels for his Atlantic racer. And at some point, we determined that we had put the middle piece in backwards, so we had to take them all apart and put them back together again. So I, the 7-year-old Formula Ford was overweight, underpowered, didn't handle as well as a brand new Lola T440 or anything like it. But it was a great learning platform. I mean, I could drive off turn 1 in Portland and bounce around in the grass and come right back on the track where that might crack the frame of the newer cars. And it had massive heavy brakes that allowed me to outbrake the newer cars if they happened to catch me at the end of the straight, and then they'd have to stay behind me until we got to the back straight. So it was all great, but there was limited amount of progress. In the second year in '78, I managed to get enough money to rent a new the new Lola, the one that you showed.
Yeah.
And now I could, compete hopefully closer to the front. But I only had enough money for that one race. But then I happened to meet at about that time a guy named Earl, who was the heir to a department store fortune. And he was irritated because his family wouldn't let him race. He really wanted to race himself, but they wouldn't allow him to do it. So he made up for it by spending money on other people, sponsoring other racers. And he offered to pay for me to attend a race at Sears Point. And this was a special, they call it a semi-professional Formula Ford race. Semi-professional meaning, I think, simply that they were paying a little bit of prize money. It wasn't an SCCA organized event. So I went to Pierre and I said, "Hey, I want to rent a car for this race." And he said, "No." I went, "What? Why?" Pierre's never been known to turn down $1. And it was because he wanted to focus attention for this special race, which was going to attract the best competition from all over the Western United States, if not over the entire nation, on his son, Tom Phillips, who was a very, very good driver, far better than me, obviously, who actually went on to compete in and win in Formula Atlantic and compete in IndyCar. I think he drove at least one race at Long Beach, if I'm not mistaken. So Pierre just said, "No, you can't rent a car. Sorry." So I went back to Earl and said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, "Well, hold on. There's this guy, I think his name was David, who was a pilot for Alaskan Airlines, who had a T440, a Lola, that he kept at Pierre's garage. And he would fly down from Anchorage or wherever he was and race it whenever he could.
Mm.
So we contacted him, and I rented the car directly from him. Right. And so when I went to pick it up at the shop, Pierre was just like not willing to talk to me. And so I had to tow it. I put it on my crappy little trailer. I towed it from Portland back down to, Sears Point, which is virtually San Francisco, nonstop, because I was afraid to stop and park at a, hotel or anything.
Yeah,
God knows what would happen to the car. I parked in front of the gate at 3 a.m. in the morning, waiting for them to open up so I could go into the secure garage area or pit area. And then Pierre just said, nobody's going to help you, right? None of the team is going to help you because we're focused, on our own drivers and primarily on Tom. But fortunately, I found a guy parked right next to us who also had a T440, and he and his wife kind of adopted me, right? They shared their tools, they shared their knowledge, they shared their lunches, right? And that's how I got through that weekend. And what happened in that weekend is the only thing that I kind of heard from Pierre, or that is I overheard him telling other drivers, is whatever you do, don't go off in turn 9, which is the fastest of the very fast sweepers on the back part of this course. And it's the area where the track is separated from concrete walls by only about 2 meters of dried grass. Right? It's useless. I mean, hard ground, dried grass. And we were using a track variation, which is kind of unique. We would come out of the famous hairpin, the last turn at Sears Point. And then normally you would go up a little bit of a straight, and then you turn left and you go up the hill, right? But instead, we went straight onto the drag racing track. So we were basically just doing the last turn hairpin, a long straight up the hill, and then another hairpin at the end, and then the sweepers at the back. Okay? And so I got I don't know what, 10th or something in my heat, which advanced me to the final. The other unique aspect of this quote semi-professional race is that it had standing start rather than a rolling start.
Okay.
Probably none of us had ever done a standing start before, right? Certainly I hadn't. And so we're lined up. I'm watching the car in front of me in case, I need to move around it or whatever. And the flag falls, and I watch in perfect John Frankenheimer cinematic slow motion as the left rear tire of the car in front of me starts turning, and smoke starts rising from it, and an object flies out of it, and it describes this perfect arc until, oh shit, I forgot to close the visor of my helmet. And this marble-sized stone slams into my cheek just below my left eye, right? Which certainly woke me up. So we all go streaming up this long straight, and we're coming up to this hairpin turn at the end of the straight, probably at, 130 miles per hour, probably near top speed in the Formula 4. 40 over-caffeinated, testosterone, egotistical amateur drivers competing for money for the first time. What could possibly go wrong? And of course it did. Cars were scattered all over the place. I got hit from behind. That pushed me into the car in front of me. Yeah, there you go.
It's this one, isn't it? You went up here.
We went, look at the left, look at the one on the upper left. The first one.
That one?
No. Yes, that's right. Okay, yeah. So the lower, this one, yes. The lower right corner is the final turn. And then we come out of that final turn and we go up this little gray line. That's the straight. That's the drag strip. And then we go up, and then we go down to the hairpin turn at the top, and then we do these sweepers at the end. Okay? That was the track. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this carnage in the first turn. I immediately noticed that the car is really squirrely in the fast sweepers, and that it's I'm not keeping up on that long main straight. And after about 10 or 15 of the laps, however long the race was, I eventually lose it. in, of course, turn 9. And I remember that they told me in the Jim Russell Racing School, if you start to spin and you can't catch it, push in the clutch. That is, remove the drive from the rear wheels, so you're more likely to spin down the middle of the track rather than shooting off in one direction or another. So that's what I did, and I spun kind of neatly down the middle of the track, and the car came to a stop, pointed in the right direction, right on those 2 meters of dried grass, with the right wheels about a centimeter from that concrete wall. It was like if I parked it there.
Yeah.
And the battery was dead. I couldn't get restarted. I got out and I looked at the car and saw that in that first turn crash, the exhaust pipe had been bent at about 30 degrees. So that's no power on the straight. And the little tail with the little gurney flap at the end of it had been mangled when I got hit from behind. So that's why, instability in the high-speed turns and eventually spinning. And I was driving home by myself, towing the car back to Pierre's garage in Portland. And, I'd been doing this for going on 2 years. And I thought, you're probably not on the fast track to F1 at this point. And, I did win. I won $50 for my heat from my heat race, but I had to split that. I had to give $25 of that to my multi-million-dollar sponsor for some kind of, he needed to show income in order to write off his sponsorships as a tax loss. So, and I thought, I've spent probably enough in these 2 years to go back to college and pay tuition, room, and board for the remaining 3 years of college. So that's probably the wise move. So that's when I decided to go back to school.
I wouldn't have gone back to school, mate. I think you were having too much fun on the racetrack by the sounds of it as well. And I think that's the thing. You can see, as when picking up on when you talk about it as well, that you had a good time and you enjoyed yourself and everything else. But you've seen a lot, haven't you? You as I say, part of our build up was you sort of dropping me loads of messages. This one I found quite interesting. How did this come about?
Yeah, this can make any true racing fan incredibly jealous. So how did this come about? Let me try to make this a little more succinct than I have been so far. So I have my best mate is a guy named Ulrich. And he's a Danish artist, a brilliant artist, by the way. And he has, I met him in probably 2016. And he's been going to, or had been going to Monaco every year religiously for a number of years. He also went to Le Mans for a number of years. I mean, I thought I was a big racing fan until I met him. He's encyclopedic knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so he would go down with a group of, I think, primarily Norwegians who had some connections to the ACO, the Automobile Club of Monaco, ACM. So they got first purchase on the tickets, first choice on the tickets, so on and so forth. And so 2022, I believe, he called me on the Tuesday before the race and said, I've got this, little health issue. I'm not going to be able to go. I said, oh, that's too bad, but you'll easily be able to sell your tickets. And he said, no, if I can't go, I want you to go. So you can report to me what's going on at the race. So long story short, he gave me his tickets. And so I okay. And I won't refuse. So I quickly got organized, drove down there, went to the hotel that he had reserved, or his group had reserved outside of Monaco. That used the driver that they had reserved to get into the track. And so Friday we show up. We went to a little club right next to Parc Fermé that unfortunately is no longer there. It's called. It's been there for decades. Really hard to find, but if you went to this bar area, you could stand at the fence that separates you from Parc Fermé, and there was a gate where the drivers were coming in. I got an autograph from Carlos Sainz right there. I got a photo from Lewis Hamilton. Oh, I should have sent you actually. Me taking a photo of Lewis Hamilton appears in Drive to Survive for just for like I don't know what 2 seconds. Anyway, and then middle of the day, it was time for us to move up to the Hotel de Paris. Okay, so this is Casino Square at the Hotel de Paris, right at the top of the hill from the first straight as you come up from start finish. And we arrive at the hotel, and first they're like, "Oh, you don't have the right kind of tickets. We're not going to let you in." And then they finally figured it out. We go in. We knew we were somewhere in the restaurant, but it's a big, big restaurant, and most of it is indoors. So you could easily you could pay, I don't know whatever these things cost, 2,000 euros, and still be sitting in the restaurant, nowhere near the track. But the guy is leading us to he says, "I'll take you to your table." So fine, we go up. He leads us into the restaurant, most opulent, like Napoleonic design you've ever seen. He leads us through the restaurant. He leads us onto the terrace. I'm going, Jesus, we're going to be on the terrace. He leads us past the first row of tables. He leads us up here. And this empty seat with my backpack on it, on the strap on it, was my seat. I was literally a meter from the edge of the track at the top of Casino Square.
There's probably a lot of people that are jealous now.
I should hope so. It was amazing. I mean, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out ways to pay Ulrich back for all this. I did take him to Imola for the F1 race last year, so that was partial repayment.
Nuts, man! I bet that was an experience and a half. Now, there was something we didn't touch on actually as well. That I'm reading through your story and the bits of obviously the brief times of history. Now, I do see a little bit of an awkward track-size conversation.
Oh no!
With a certain
personality.
Yeah, with a certain personality. Tell us that. I'm sorry. I know we normally touch on iRacing and sim racing, but this is far more bloody more interesting.
Yeah, okay.
So, how did this all go on with a certain individual? Okay. I'll let you say the name.
Okay. So, end of 2007, we were living in Bonn, Germany, former capital. Bonn is a very small city, not that interesting, but it has the advantage of being about easily less than an hour, maybe only 15 minutes from the Nürburgring. So my son and I have been to the Nürburgring,
multiple times.
For racing events, 10, 15 times. And in the other direction, it's about 35, 40 minutes from the kartbahn, the kart track in Kerpen, called the Aflandring, where Michael Schumacher and Ralf Schumacher grew up racing karts.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people think that believe the story or heard the story that their father owned the track, and that's why they drove there every day. But in fact, he didn't own the track. He was hired as the manager of the track.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, they lived in the village a few hundred meters from the track, so they still had every opportunity to drive there every day after school. And so it's like the most famous kart track in Germany. And in 2007, late 2007, I convinced my wife to allow me to buy a very used kart for our son, who was then 11.
Now, is this the one that's behind your shoulder?
No, that is later on.
Okay.
I didn't send you a picture of his first kart, which was first of all, it's a Bambini kart, which it's called Cadet, right? So it's much smaller, right? It's made for basically 7 to 12-year-old kids.
Yeah.
8.5 horsepower, right? 2-stroke engine. And so I bought this kart for like less than 1,000 euros. I mean, it was truly a crapper, but it was amazingly fast. And so the idea was we were just going to take it to practice days because I was convinced I couldn't afford to go kart racing with him. And fortunately, after we bought the kart club in Kerpen worried about the fact that fewer and fewer people were showing up to introduce their kids to karting, came up with a money-saving scheme. So they called it the Bambini Kart Challenge. And they said, you pay an entry fee, which I think was €100, at most 150, for a weekend. And they give you the motor. You draw lots for the motors, which are supposed to be all equally prepared. And they give you the tires so people can't dope the tires with all kinds of toxic chemicals to make them stickier, right? Which were the two primary ways in which people could have an unfair advantage in kart racing, right? Tuning the engines and doping the tires. So suddenly we had an opportunity to go racing in an affordable way, and we said, okay, sure, we'll do it. We started preparing for it, and Dominic started driving his kart for the first time. And at one of those practice days before the season started, we're at Kevin, and I go out onto the back part of the course, which we called the forest. It was the part you couldn't see from the pits. And there's Michael Schumacher standing at the hairpin, watching the Bambinis going around. And I think, well, this is cool. I mean, he's retired now from Formula One before he went back to Mercedes. And I think this is cool. He's like watching, he's looking for new talent. So I kind of saddle up next to him and, say, hi, how you doing? And I said, so what do you think of number 7, whatever number was on my kid's car? And he's like, what? I said, number 7, that's my son. What do you think? And he effectively said in German, fuck off, I'm watching my own son. And, which, to be fair, is something I might have said if somebody had come up to me, right?
Yeah,
but the thing was, at that point, I didn't know he had a son. I didn't, let alone knowing that the son was on the track. But it was, in fact, Mick Schumacher was kind of going public at this time. It turns out he had secretly been practicing, and then later racing at tracks, mostly in Spain, right? They lived in Mallorca, for at least a year. And now, because of the Bambini Kart Challenge, he was going to come out and go public and start racing, not under his own name. He initially raced under his mother's name, Mick Petch. And so now my son and Mick Schumacher are in this kart challenge together. That's the second story, if you want to hear it. That's the end of my story about my one and only awkward conversation with Michael Schumacher.
I find it amazing that literally he probably just turned around and said, fuck off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, basically,
yeah, literally, fuck off. I'm talking to I want to watch my own son. I'm not here. I don't give a shit about yours. First off, though, did your son beat Mick?
Well, that's funny. Certainly at the beginning, in the, the first sessions, the first practice sessions and so forth, at the first couple of races, yes, he was faster. Given that my son had at that point about a few weeks of experience in a kart, and Mick had a year. But I don't want to say that my son is more talented than Mick Schumacher. But the fascinating story about Mick Schumacher is that although I said he was going public, the family was still hyper careful to protect him from the publicity mania that you can imagine would happen when people find out.
They always were.
Yeah,
they always were. I think that was the thing. They always were, weren't they? Michael and his wife, they were all very, very careful, even since the accident.
As they are now about Michael himself. So, I mean, Mick would, I don't know, I don't want to say whether Mick would or Mick wasn't allowed, but in any case, he rarely came out of the big official Tony Kart team tent. When he did, he was almost inevitably wearing his helmet.
Which is a sure sign to piss off and don't talk to me.
There were bodyguards around the track, so when I would go and stand, trackside and take some pictures during a practice session, they'd come over and say, "Hey, did you take any pictures of Mick?" I don't know if I took any pictures of Mick. I'm just taking pictures of. They say, "Show us in your camera." Right? So I quickly caught on. I would show them the video index thumbnails rather than the actual still photo thumbnail. I still don't think I have a picture of Mick. And somehow, despite all of that hyper protection and paranoia and so forth, somehow my son and Mick became buddies, right? My son was old for a Bambini. He was like 12 in the middle of the 2008 season. Mick was 9, maybe barely 9.
Just 9, yeah. 1999 he was born.
Exactly. So I came back at one point near the end of that season. I came back to our, what was it, 1988 Volkswagen van that we used as a cart transporter. And my son is sitting in the passenger seat. Mick Schumacher is sitting on his lap. And they're playing some kind of computer game together on a handheld controller. That's the photo that I really wish I had.
Nuts. It is nuts how you came to be where you're being. And to be honest with you, Tim, I think, we've been going nearly 45, 50 minutes already. And it's just, we've probably only just scratched the surface of things as well. And I just find it absolutely fascinating that you met Michael Schumacher, a go-kart track, who told you to fuck off. I find that amazing. You had Mick Schumacher, his son, sat on your son's lap playing video games in a VW Transport. What was it? Where was the VW T3 Transporter? Yep, playing a game. And you've been to the Monaco Grand Prix about, well, 1 meter, 2 meters, maybe I'll give you 6 foot away from the racetrack.
Yeah.
It just sounds absolutely bonkers. Now, as you normally know, we finish off with one car, one track. I do already have your selection because you sent it to me. See, I love you. I love people like this. They send it to me in advance, everybody. As a hint. Okay, so let's start off. I'm going to go to your track because I find this fascinating, but your car's even more fascinating. So I'm going to go to your track first. Tell us about the track that you picked first that you would like to see.
Yeah, so the track that I picked was used only once in a Formula One championship race. This is called Pescara on the Adriatic coast. So the gray area to the upper right corner is the Adriatic Sea. Pescara is in the lower right-hand corner of the track itself.
Just down here,
near the red arrow, right? That's the village. It's more or less, I'm guessing, halfway down the boot on the right-hand side of the boot of Italy. And this track existed since 1926. Existed as a track. It's all public roads, with one small exception that I'll get to in a moment. Public roads, but they were closed off in order to be used for racing since 1926. And it was used for, I believe, some non-championship F1 previously, but the only time it was used as a championship F1 race was in 1957.
It was.
And then only because some other races were canceled and they were trying to fill the calendar. The part of it that is not a public. First of all, a couple of things. It's the longest track ever used in Formula One. It's about a kilometer or less than 2 kilometers.
15.894 miles.
Yeah, I think it's less than 2 kilometers longer than the Nürburgring Nordschleife that was used in F1.
Yeah, about 25.579 kilometers.
Yeah. And already in 1957, it was so dangerous that Enzo Ferrari, refused to allow his cars and drivers to take part. Right?
I can imagine.
The chicane that you can see just before the start-finish flag was the first use of an artificial chicane in Formula One. And it was
been hay bales?
I don't know what it was constructed of, but it was there in order to slow down the cars coming off of this, God knows how many miles long straight, where the Madonna straight there, before they got to the pits, which were right at the start-finish flag. So you didn't want cars entering the pits at top speed. So that's why they put the chicane there. The race was won by Sterling Moss in a Van Wall. And not famously, but fun fact is that Jack Brabham in the Cooper was running out of gas. They had improperly calculated how much gas they needed for this 3-hour race. So he stopped at a gas station and just took some money out of his pocket and paid for gas so that he could finish the race.
He was still three laps down, though.
Yeah, I'm sure that many were, right?
Yeah, there was literally, out of everybody that started that race, there was 16 drivers started, only 7 finished.
Yeah.
Jack was 3 laps down. Giorgio Scarlatti was 1 lap down. Stuart Lewis Evans was 1 lap down. Maston Gregory was 8. Is that 8 minutes? I think that is back. Harry Schell was 6 minutes. Fangio was 3 minutes. I think that is. I don't think that's 3 seconds. And Sterling Moss was 2 minutes. It was out in front in the van wall. Now that takes us onto your car.
Yes. So an appropriate car for that track, 1957, has to be the Maserati 250F.
Why does that look like a Lego man?
That's Fangio in Monaco in the 250F. I'm not sure if this is 1957. It probably is. Yeah, it's too bad iRacing doesn't have this kind of.
You could probably put these into mods like Assetto Corsa and R-Factor.
I'm sure it's available in Assetto Corsa. And by the way, the track is available in Assetto Corsa. It's I think it costs like a minimum €5 or £5 donation in order to get it. But it's available in Assetto Corsa, R-Factor 2, and Automobilista.
See, now that would be amazing. Now, what's this?
This is the book. This is anybody anybody who claims to be a racing fan, or at least a Formula One racing fan, has to buy this book and read it. It's only like 150 pages long. You can read it in probably an hour and a half. The Last Road Race. It's about that 1957 Pescara Grand Prix by Richard Williams, who's written many books on road racing. Was with the Guardian for a long time. And he calls it the last road race because it truly was the last race held on what were open public roads that were closed off, or not so well closed off, frankly, for the purposes of the race.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon, guys. I'd like to point out as well. However, the hardcover is more expensive than the paper. It's cheaper than the paperback, which makes no sense. But yeah, available on Amazon, £3.60 for the hardcover, £10.68 for the paperback. I'm not quite sure why that works out like that as well. But Tim, that is it. We've come to the end as well. We had an absolutely amazing time, and I'm sure we could probably have a more amazing time and talk for. Absolutely. I'm sure we probably could do, to be honest with you, sir, and have a few more elongated hours on that one. But dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. Your journey, your story has just been absolutely amazing. And I'd be interested to get you back and carry on where we've left off as well. But pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, James, and thanks to you for your brilliant commentary and broadcast of the races we're doing. And I've seen you on some other series as well. It's just absolutely top quality.
Thank you very much for that one. That's going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much to Mr. Tim Waters for joining us for episode 16. If you want to get yourself involved, you can. Links down in the description below as well. I'm just trying to cipher through the calendar really quickly. I've got a week off next week, which was quite nice as well. And then we go to Jack Ashton on the 22nd of July. So we've got the 8th and the 15th available at the moment as well. I'm sure somebody will come through. And then Luke Maxwell on the 29th of July as well. So join us for that one once again. But guys, thank you so much for listening. It's been myself, JP. I've been alongside an absolute legend in Mr. Tim Waters, and look forward to having another conversation with him shortly as well. But for now, guys, and as always, take care. See you all later.
Take care, guys.